This week on Crossroad Politics.
Explain why you should stay in. If you're not in, explain why you should get in.
The battle over Indiana's next budget.
Indiana ranked 42nd in the nation in addressing behavioral health.
From causes fighting for funding.
I don't believe there's a better investment we can make.
To the tax that could be raised.
A $2 cigarette tax increase will generate over $3 million in new revenue.
Lawmakers had money on their minds. Plus,
this is a purple state where 50% of our voters don't show up.
After an overwhelming defeat in 2024, the new leader of the state Democratic Party is outlining her vision of turning things around. And what's going to happen with your property taxes? A big rally for cuts, and lawmakers scramble for answers. And thanks for joining us on Crossroads Politics here on WTHR Plus. I'm Anne-Marie Tiernan, today in for Dustin Grove. This week, the Indiana Senate heard testimony on the state budget. Our Statehouse reporter Emily Longnecker was there as groups came to the Statehouse to make their case for their funds. Emily.
Hi, Ann. You know, Republican lawmakers have said repeatedly this session that this is going to be a lean budget year because they've said less revenue is expected to come into the state. So the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Republican State Senator Ryan Mishler, told the folks testifying yesterday that, look, if you're not in the budget right now, it's unlikely that you're going to be put in because if you go in, someone else has to come out. That didn't stop organizations from coming with their requests on everything from investing in the state's military bases to growing Indiana's MedWorks program for Hoosiers with disabilities. Members of Indiana's Defense Task Force, created by lawmakers in 2019 to identify ways to expand military bases in Indiana, asked for $50 million to fund a military base infrastructure grant program, an appropriation that's not already in this budget proposal.
But the problem is we have no funding. The legislation was passed, but there was no funding set aside for the program.
Republican Senate President Pro Tem Roderick Bray said he couldn't say if funding could be added later for the program or others not already in the budget.
You got to make tough decisions when you're crafting a budget and trying to make sure that you're spending within your means, which of course is our first job.
Another request above what's already in this year's budget proposal, more money to grow Indiana's family medicine residency program. According to testimony, by 2030, Indiana will need 800 more primary care physicians. The current budget proposal has $7 million a year allocated to help the state's residency program. The ask today was for close to $14 million.
We've made such good progress in adding physicians for this state. And I'm sure you understand that if you graduate a residency in Indiana, more likely you're going to stay in Indiana.
Again, when asked about more funding for programs already in the budget, Senator Bray saying it will be hard to find that extra money.
If you're somebody who is in the budget now, staying flat is probably a win for you.
And that hearing was a long one, about 3 hours long, and we heard a lot of testimony from a lot of groups, a lot of nonprofits, folks that work with youth organizations, people who also work with victims of crime, everyone making their case to the Appropriations Committee for a place in this budget. Ann?
So, Emily, one part of the budget that certainly is getting a lot of support, especially from women, is the removal of the tax on menstrual products. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, there's been a push in past legislative sessions, particularly among Democratic lawmakers, to remove what's called the pink tax, again, that tax on menstrual products. And that's a proposal that we've seen in past legislative sessions that always gets voted down, even among female Republican lawmakers. I've seen that. Now removing the pink tax is part of this year's House budget proposal. Indiana menstrual products, they are taxed at 7%. With other items that are considered luxuries. 26 states and D.C. have already removed their pink tax. Removing it here, it's estimated will reduce revenue going into the general fund by about $11 million over 2 years. The removal of this pink tax, this proposal, has garnered testimony of support from women, like a 16-year-old Riverside High School student. She had testified in the House Ways and Means Committee earlier this session. She couldn't be at yesterday's Senate Appropriations Committee to give her testimony, but a representative for her read a letter that was pretty powerful. Take a listen.
No one deserves to be profited off of at the expense of their bodily dignity. Bleeding is not a luxury. Affording basic care items should not be either. The sales tax applied to period products is outdated and damaging to Hoosiers. And so thank you, and also to House leaders, for including this in the budget. And now you, as our fiscal experts in the Senate, we are counting on you.
So that was just one bit of testimony. Again, a lot of organizations testified with their asks to be put in the budget, or even to have some increases for what was already in there. And Senate President Pro Tem Roderick Bray talked about that, saying if you're in the budget this time around and your funding stayed flat, meaning it's the same amount as you got in the last budget cycle, that you should consider that actually a win.
All right, so that's one tax gone, Emily, but some people also were there speaking in favor of raising another tax, I understand.
Yeah, they were talking about one tax they think could be raised without raising too much of a fuss. Several people testified in favor of raising this tax, saying it would produce more money, more revenue for the state, and that is raising Indiana's cigarette tax.
Right now, if you buy a pack of cigarettes, you pay close to $1 tax. Several groups with the Indiana Tobacco Free Coalition gave lawmakers the statistics on smoking in Indiana. According to testimony, Indiana has the 13th highest adult smoking rate in the country, with over 10% of Hoosier high schoolers saying they use tobacco products. Supporters of raising the cigarette tax say it would lead to fewer people smoking, saving Indiana health care costs from illnesses like cancer connected to tobacco, while also raising more money for the state.
Our youth are very price conscious. They don't have disposable income as adults have. So the $2, we are trying to make it less something that young people look forward to doing because of cost.
Now, in years past, the House has put a cigarette tax increase in their budget. They didn't this time around in this proposal. They kind of left the ball in the Senate's court, because in past years when the House put it in, the Senate always blocked it. And Senator Bray said yesterday that his caucus is open to possibly raising the cigarette tax. He said that they are talking about it, but he couldn't say definitively yes or no if it's going to happen. Ann?
All right, Emily, thanks so much for that great detailed recap there. I'm joined now here in studio by Nikki Kelly. She happens to be the editor of the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. So this is your wheelhouse. And you've written about this issue of cigarette tax. That's something that Emily was just talking about there. Why is this particularly an attractive option for Indiana lawmakers?
Well, I would say no tax is necessarily attractive to a lawmaker, but a, quote, sin tax or a user tax is a little more acceptable from time to time, also because they can dedicate the money specifically toward health. I mean, there's a direct tie between cigarette use and, you know, the cost that Indiana's paying on Medicaid. And so if you can direct that $300 million to growing Medicaid costs, it gives them a little, I think, comfort with it.
Okay. Now, lawmakers have made a lot of changes to the governor's property tax proposal. We're going to get to that a little bit more in a minute. But so far, the budget has not changed that much. Do you see any big revisions coming as we get down to the finish line here?
Yeah, I really don't think there will be massive changes. I mean, there are little things here and there between like the Braun version and the House version, and I think we'll see little things again when the Senate comes out with their version. But they're all pretty much in sync on where they want to go with that. Mm-hmm.
Boy, and it's important to note that when we're talking about the budget, we're talking about a 2-year budget cycle.
Yeah, it's a 2-year, $44 billion, 46, depending on where we end up, budget. And so it covers every facet of state government that you can even imagine.
Right, and that's why it's so crucial, because we're locking in here for 24 months. All right, Nikki, thanks so much. Well, the budget, not the only money problem at the Statehouse this week. There were hundreds of people that came together and they rallied because they want lower property taxes. And that is a top priority that Governor Braun has been consistent about. So let's get back out to Emily at the Statehouse. And Emily, you were there. Tell us a little bit what it was like and what really drove this demonstration.
And, you know, this crowd was angry this week. There was a lot of folks here and they were shouting and booing. They wanted to let lawmakers in this building know how they feel about their property taxes. They're not happy about it. They even called some lawmakers out by name. They also wanted to let Governor Braun know that they support his proposal for property tax relief.
I want you to repeat after me. Maybe some of these lawmakers will hear you. Where's my money? Where's my money? Where's my money? Where's my money?
WIBC's Jason Hammer led the chant for hundreds at the Statehouse Monday, demanding lawmakers do something about rising property taxes.
In the next hour, we are going to lay out all the reasons why we're here, why we're angry, why law-abiding taxpayers continually get the shaft from Republicans in this building.
Much of that anger directed at Republican lawmakers, who some here view as not doing enough to bring taxes down in their property tax relief proposals.
When you elect somebody and they screw you, what do?
Many of the signs said it all, venting a growing frustration and fear about not being able to afford to stay in homes already paid for because of rising taxes.
When you own your house outright and you worked hard to pay it off and then you have to worry about your taxes going up, you know, it's a couple $100s a month can make a big difference.
They are taxing people out of their homes. So by the time you live the American dream, you retire, you own your home, you truly don't own your home because the taxes keep getting higher and higher and higher and they can't justify it.
An issue the lieutenant governor spoke to with a question for the crowd.
Is it really your property if you have to pay the government rent to stay there? No! This is a fundamental question to our liberties, and we've got to get it right.
Governor Braun signaling the work that still has to be done, rolling up his sleeve to cheers.
I so often hear from the folks we need to get their minds right about real property tax relief. They say they're not hearing it. Well, they're going to be hearing it after today if they haven't before.
Governor Braun has said he's not afraid to veto a property tax plan from lawmakers if he's not happy with the final version or call a special session to work on it more. Monday's crowd had their own thoughts about what they'd do if lawmakers don't come up with a plan they like.
What do you do if one of these weasels doesn't do what's best for you?
Now, a handful of Republican lawmakers also spoke at this rally, including Republican State Representative J.D. Prescott, who told the crowd that he thought it would take a few sessions to repeal and replace the property tax system. That didn't go over well at all. When he said that, the crowd booed and shouted. They were really expressing how impatient they are for change on this issue. Ann?
Yes, well, you know, that is the dilemma, right? You want change and just the speed of change and the rate of change that is the next step. Emily, we'll check back in a little bit. Thanks so much. We're going to bring in Nikki here to talk a little bit about this. This is something that the governor has made no secret about, that he wants changes on property taxes. I just thought it was an interesting note that rally was on Monday, that it was St. Patrick's Day, and the green, it seems like a little bit of a disconnect of like that celebration and the issue, and yet they were leaning into the green.
Oh, they did. They told everyone to wear green as representing your money and for them to stop taking your money. They really played that up. And while it isn't the biggest rally I've ever seen in the State House, it might have been the liveliest.
Yeah, certainly it kind of looked kind of festive there. So the lawmakers know that the governor is behind this. So really, what was this rally about? Who are they trying to target? Because the governor has said, this is what I want. The lawmakers knew that. So why the need for a rally?
Oh, they definitely need it to get lawmakers on board, because the lawmakers are also hearing from their local governments. They're hearing from people who want better roads and want parks and want good police. And so if you take money away, I mean, to cut your property taxes, you have to take money away from local government and schools. It especially hits schools hard. And so, you know, they're stuck trying to satisfy two different constituencies.
Right, well, that are conflicting, directly conflicting. All right, so we're talking about this proposal. Any amendments been introduced in the House?
Not yet. We'll probably see whatever big amendment they have either next week or the week after. I do think we are going to see some sort of actual cut. Bronze was a huge actual cut. The Senate was actually a decrease in next year's increase. And I think they have finally coalesced in seeing something. They want Hoosiers' 2026 tax bills to be lower than their 2025 tax bills. By how much, I don't know. I will say calls to eliminate property taxes altogether, the repeal and replace. I mean, look, that is not happening. Not only is it not happening this session, I doubt it would ever happen. It's just too ingrained. You know, that's a huge, massive change in full structure. And I think they're trying to moderate the structure, but not eliminate it.
Right. Okay, Nikki, thanks so much. Well, our discussion continues today. Ahead here on Crossroads Politics, the future of education, not only in the state, but in the U.S., as President Trump moves to end the Federal Department of Education. What that means for students here in Indiana and also their families. Plus,
I think that we need to bring some of that back to the middle.
so what is next for Democrats here in the state of Indiana? The new state party chair outlines what she would like to change. But first,
she sees it as a fairness thing, and I see it as a fairness thing.
We heard really passionate testimony from athletes and parents as lawmakers are debating a bill banning trans women from women's college sports. We dive into that next here on Crossroads Politics on WTHR+. Welcome back. This year, both President Trump and Governor Braun here in Indiana have signed executive orders that ban trans women from playing on women's college teams. So let's head back to our Emily Longnecker, who's at the Statehouse right now. And this is where people on both sides of the debate have come and shared very personal and emotional stories. Emily?
They really did. And, you know, first, let's talk about the NCAA. They recently put a ban in place, too. And this bill's author, Republican State Representative Michelle Davis, says this bill protects women and it protects the integrity of women's sports. And this bill would put that, she says, that ban into Indiana law just in case that somewhere down the road the NCAA changes its policy or something changes at the federal level. Those against the bill say it harms the trans community and makes them a target for hate.
My name is Elle Patterson.
Standing in a room, speaking in front of some of Indiana's most powerful people, is a place 20-year-old Elle Patterson has become used to recently. Wednesday was the third time Patterson has come to the Indiana Statehouse this year to voice her support for a bill that would ban transgender women from participating in women's college sports in Indiana.
HB 1041 needs to be passed to protect bodily privacy, competitive fairness, and ensure women's safety.
The Tri-West High School graduate told lawmakers about being recruited to play Division I volleyball at San Jose State on a scholarship, only to learn when she got there was no money for her freshman year. Then, after her first season on the team, Patterson testified the coach told her she wouldn't get scholarship money for her remaining years either.
He just said that while he wanted me to say he needed the money for other people.
Patterson spoke to 13 News at IU Indy recently, where she now plays volleyball on full scholarship for the Jaguars.
I just think the program that we have is special.
After Patterson transferred to IU, she says she learned one of her former teammates at San Jose was a transgender woman.
I know that the other player was on scholarship, so had they not been on scholarship, then I would personally say that I could have been on scholarship.
For Patterson, House Bill 1041 is about many concerns, including fairness in women's sports.
When it comes to athletics, I personally think that there should be a definitive line.
Hello, everybody. My name is Beth Clausen, and I'm here to ask you to vote no on HB 1041.
For Beth Clausen, Wednesday also wasn't her first time addressing a room full of Indiana lawmakers.
I am here to talk to you as a parent of 3 children, one who happens to be transgender.
Like Patterson, Clausen believes the debate around House Bill 1041 is about fairness, too.
She sees it as a fairness thing, and I see it as a fairness thing.
But Clausen is on the other side of this issue. She has a 12-year-old transgender daughter, Kieran.
My child is growing up in a world where she can't do the activities that she wants to do.
Clausen says Kieran used to love playing sports, but doesn't now, in part because of the ban enacted last session on trans girls playing on girls' sports teams in grades K through 12.
She knows that if she were to participate in middle school sports, as the law is written now, she would have to be on the boy team, and that's not who she is. It's not who she's been for the past 9 years.
Now both women, one a college athlete, the other a mother, are here to speak from personal experience, each asking lawmakers to vote a different way on House Bill 1041.
Now, the vote on 1041 did not happen this week, just testimony from folks on both sides of the debate. But as you heard there, no shortage of emotion and conviction on both sides. Ann?
Absolutely. Good job laying out just the different ideas and thoughts and positions on this very complicated issue. Emily, thank you so much. We're going to take over to Emily now, or to Nikki now. And so we hear that. I mean, they both make very compelling arguments on both sides. Do you expect any changes to this bill before it presumably heads to the governor's desk?
I really doubt it. I mean, the fact is that, first of all, this isn't a bill you can compromise on. Like, it is either yes or no. So there's not a lot of ways to lower it or amend
compromise.
It. And also, they want to make it, if they keep it clean with no changes, then it would go straight to the governor, and you can avoid concurrences and conference committees and basically complications at the end of the session.
Yeah, so you think, your prediction is it's going to go as written right now?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay, Nikki, thanks so much. Some veterans now are speaking out against a bill that would change who can receive veterans benefits here in the state of Indiana. So this was a bill that was in committee this week, but the lawmakers there ended up not voting on it after they heard some testimony from veterans who say they're pretty upset about the bill as written. So Emily, dig into this a little bit. What don't the veterans like?
Okay, so let me explain this bill first. It would give benefits to people who were served and discharged, not dishonorably discharged, because when that happens, you're no longer considered a veteran. This bill would give benefits to people who were discharged under what's called under conditions other than dishonorable. That means that that person is still considered a veteran if they have that kind of discharge. Now, the bill's author, Republican State Representative Steve Bartels, explained that could mean someone discharged for something like substance abuse.
Veterans still need our help, and this would allow the Department of Veterans Affairs to help these folks get the help they need.
But some vets testified that having this bill giving benefits to people who are discharged under conditions other than dishonorable would lower the standard for receiving benefits in Indiana. They explained that when someone is discharged in this way, other than a dishonorable discharge, there is a process to get that discharge upgraded to still get benefits.
Just up on the third floor today, I spoke with veterans, and they were shocked to hear that this change was being made. The comment that was made to me was, well, Lisa, that's kind of a slap in the face. And very honestly, as an honorably discharged veteran, it is kind of a slap in the face that you want to make our honorable service equal to those that were kicked out of the military with less than honorable character of service.
Now, this wasn't the only testimony on the bill, vets who were against the bill. Some veterans were there and they testified in support of it. The testimony, though, against this bill was enough that the committee's chairman, Republican State Senator Jim Tomes, decided to hold the bill for now to consider some possible changes in the language. This testimony against the bill was enough to give some lawmakers on this committee pause for right now. Ann?
All right, Emily, thanks so much. Let's take it over to Nikki. Just so much red tape, and then defining, who qualifies, changing your category. Overall, there's been other bills that are veteran focused that you're keeping an eye on?
There are always some veterans bills introduced. I know in some of the property tax discussions, we've talked about giving additional deductions to veterans off their property tax bills. There's a bill moving that would exempt military pay. So it's not necessarily it's for active military, but from income taxes. I mean, there are a number of sort of groups bills like that are moving through. There are also charity gaming bills that can help veterans organizations to bring in more money to help their members. So there's a few here and there.
by naming the veterans groups as designees of the profits?
Well, it just allows them to offer different types of charity gambling, electronic pull tabs, which they've wanted for years. It's not quite a slot machine, but it's getting up there closely.
Closer and closer.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Nikki, thank you so much for that insight. Let's talk a little politics here. This week was also the first one on the job for the new leader of the Indiana Democratic Party. And Emily, this new leader certainly inherits a party that is eager to turn things around, but it's also divided on which path to take. So let's dig into this a little bit.
Yeah, and the new head of Indiana's Democratic Party, Karen Talion, says that she plans to call the Democratic chairs in all 92 counties. Some supported her in this role, coming into this role, and some didn't. She says that she plans to call each of those chairs and ask them where they can find common ground.
You know, I want to talk to them about being a unified party. And I also want to talk to them about what their concerns were or are continuing to be, and also what the state party can do for each of the counties. I truly believe that you can put any two groups in a room, even if they have different views on things, but there are points of agreement. And I've done enough mediations I was a litigator for years. That's where you start. Where can you agree?
Do you know any of the points of agreement at this point right now, or is that something that you still have to find your way?
I'm going to listen, but we all share the same goals. You know, good public education, health care, all the rest of environmental concerns. I would say that the Democrats as a party share those goals. It's just a question of how we get there.
And Talion also addressed the current frustration among Democratic voters with how Democratic leaders in Washington are responding to the actions of the Trump administration. I asked her what Democratic leaders here in Indiana can do to respond to that frustration. Take a listen.
Take advantage of it. I know that there's the part that, you know, the Democrats are split on how far to be against. It's not that they're all opposed to the Trump administration. It's just a question of how far opposed are they. And so we have, like I said, a point of agreement to a certain extent, and we can capitalize on that, on those places where we all agree.
I also asked Talion if there's a way forward for Democrats in Indiana, which is a red state where Democrats have not won a statewide office since Joe Donnelly won his Senate seat, which he only had for one term, and then lost to now Governor Mike Braun.
This state is not so red. And I'm going to echo, other people have said this. I didn't make this up. This is a purple state where 50% of our voters don't show up. So that is a huge push for me. I see as a big challenge is get our people back to the polls.
Why aren't they going? Do you know?
Oh man, I wish I knew. I've heard a lot of explanations. I don't know who to vote for. I don't know, it's too hard. I've had some people tell me I can't take a whole day off work to go vote. So, maybe they think their vote doesn't count. I don't know, but that's one of the things that we need to find out.
So Talian, ready to dig in this new role. She was here at the Statehouse this week. This is her old stomping ground. She was a state senator here for 16 years before she decided to retire. She called that time kind of sitting on the beach for a while, enjoying that retirement. But then she says that she observed what she calls bad and tumultuous times here in this country, and she decided to get back in the game, saying that there's a lot of work to do. Ann?
Yes, a steep climb is for sure. All right, here in Indiana. Thank you so much, Emily. So, Nikki, a couple things here. Do you agree with that assessment that we're a purple state? And we know that the voter turnout here in Indiana is abysmal. I mean, we're always, always, always at the bottom when you look across the country for our turnout rates.
I think calling it purple might be a bit optimistic. I mean, I think Indiana is a solidly Republican state, and I do think it's fair to point out that they aren't getting their voters out, and that is a great place for her to start.
Yeah. But what are we, 49th or 50th?
Yeah, depending on which exact year you look at or which survey, we're dead last or 49th. I mean, they're all pretty bad.
Okay, so, but if you're trying to galvanize a party, the key is that, first of all, you got to get your soldiers in line. And we saw a lot of divisions, even in the vote of deciding who was going to be the leader. Yeah. So, you know, what do you predict moving forward when we saw how hard it was to decide on who was going to be the Democratic Party leader for Indiana?
Yeah, it was hard. It was very close. And to be fair, these are the same conversations that national Democrats are dealing with. Unsure if they are focusing too much on, you know, social issues and not enough on economic issues, you know, whether they've kind of gone to the extremes as some Republicans have on the other side. So this is the same debate, and it's definitely going to take some work to try to bring them all together.
So is it apparent, because you're at the State House, you know, every day, are these divisions within the Democratic Party apparent to you day in, day out as you're doing your work?
Not every day, but they definitely pop up on some issues. I know there was a bill last year that had to do with birth control and IUDs, and some Democrats were just terribly mad about it. Others said, well, let's look at the overall good of the bill and not get caught up in, you know, finding the perfect thing. And so you see things like that. Some Democrats are younger, more progressive, want to move a little faster and stronger, and some are more moderate and want to cater to those views. So
yeah. So let's just get out the crystal ball, you know, Nikki's crystal ball here. What do you think is really needed for the future of the Indiana Democratic Party to be successful? Where do you see this going?
Oh, wow, that's above me. You know, I'm not a political science. I don't have a degree in political science or anything like that. I think they're trying to find their way, and she's probably got a good start by contacting, you know, the people who voted against her to see why and what they can work on. But it's not, and it's also not going to turn around in a year. They're super minorities in the legislature. They don't have a single statewide office. You know, this is going to take a couple years to rebuild.
Yes, back to that theme of rate of change.
Yep.
All right, thank you so much, Nikki. Well, our conversations continue here on Crossroad Politics, and we're talking about some of the national issues that are trickling down. President Trump has ordered the end of the Department of Education, what that means for our local schools, our students, and our families. But first, what role should Indiana police play in enforcing immigration laws? A change at the Statehouse is next here on Crossroad Politics. The debate over immigration enforcement was back in the spotlight at the Indiana Statehouse this week. Lawmakers on a Senate committee heard testimony and made changes to a bill that lawmakers in the House had already passed. And Emily, there was one big question at the heart of this debate this week. Let's elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, the question, Anne, that really came out of the testimony is what determines probable cause, leading someone to believe, leading a sheriff or jail staff to believe that someone is here illegally or in an undocumented fashion. That is the question that came out of the testimony around House Bill 1393. Now, this bill has had some changes to it, and here's where it now stands. It deals with two scenarios. When an officer arrests someone on a misdemeanor or felony and takes them to jail or gives them a summons to appear in court. In both cases, jail staff or a sheriff, if they had probable cause to believe that that person was here illegally or undocumented, they would be required to notify ICE. And the debate that came out of this is what goes into them having probable cause to believe that the person was here illegally to then call ICE.
The bill's author, Republican State Representative Garrett Boscom, characterizes the bill as standardizing a process one county sheriffs have testified they're already doing. Boscom agrees.
In many communities, this is already happening. Once we notify ICE, then it's on ICE to make whatever determination that they make.
But what about before that? What goes into a sheriff or jail staff determining probable cause that someone could be undocumented after they've been arrested or charged? Boscom says that comes from questioning during the intake process. Many who testified said they believed the bill would lead to racial profiling. That assertion led to its own debate.
I do not want to be profiled. Neither does my mother. Neither does my sister, teachers, and everybody else. It does increase it. Unfortunately, we live in a red state where there are officers, and unfortunately, they are going to race. And I'm sorry, but if it happens, I mean, I hope you feel okay with that.
It is illegal, and it cannot happen, should never happen, and if it does happen, the officer will not be an officer very long.
Some said it's not if it will happen, but when.
This bill will undoubtedly foster racial profiling. The standard of probable cause is most troublesome and inherently subjective and will lead to judgments based on appearance, language, proficiency, or accent.
What do you want the standard to be? You don't like probable cause, so what should it be?
Senator, I would leave that up to you and the members of the committee.
Only two groups testified they were neutral on the bill, the Indiana Public Defenders Council and the Indiana Sheriff's Association.
We're going to remain neutral on this and open to conversations about this process and what it looks like because, as we all know, this continues to change.
And we could see more changes to this bill when it goes before the full Senate. It was voted out of the committee by a vote of 5-3. 2 Democratic senators voted against it, and actually 1 Republican senator voted against it. Republican Senator Sue Glick, she said that she felt that what was in the bill was already happening, that law enforcement were already notifying ICE, and she called this bill well-intentioned but unnecessary. Ann?
All right, Emily, thanks so much for that context. So let's turn it over to Nikki here. This seems like a small step back from what was the original intent of this bill.
Well, I mean, I think the overall intent of the bill is to make sure ICE is notified if they have someone in custody who they think might be here illegally. The bill originally had the officer doing that, and that I think everyone said, hey, they need to be focused on the street. Let's handle this at the sheriff's side when they're actually intaking them for a totally separate crime. And we do have to remember, this is when they're being arrested for something unrelated, and they're asking them questions, and they say, I don't know if this guy's legal or not, so we're going to tell ICE. So it does get to the same goal, but just in a slightly different way.
On the reporting side. And it was interesting that Sue Glick was saying that she thought that this informing was already happening. And so what we're to take from that is that we had people that were in custody in our jails and this notification was not happening?
Oh, we have people have testified regularly, sheriffs, that they have people in jail all the time. They get detainer requests from ICE. They cooperate with them. It's sort of the chicken and the egg conversation. You know, on one hand they say, oh, well, we're already doing that, so the bill isn't necessary. And then Senator Friedman says, well, if we're already doing it, then what does this bill hurt? And so, you know, you kind of just go round and round on that.
Okay, so what further tweaks could you see in this measure? Because it did seem like, okay, we're kind of like, okay, we're not ready to move forward. We need to have a little adjustment here or there. What do you think would help make it more amenable?
I think these were some big changes. And then also on second reading yesterday on Thursday, they did remove a provision that would give immunity to sheriffs for, if they held them on a detainer request or notified ICE. And so that taking that out, I think, will help gain some votes as well.
Okay, and as we heard there, the Sheriff's Department, as of now, is saying we're going to remain neutral and see what comes out of this. All right, Nikki, thanks so much. In the nation's capital, President Donald Trump has signed an executive order directing to the Department of Education to shut down. Now, keep in mind, he signed that order this week, but moving forward, it will take an act of Congress to eliminate the department. The president's move, however, can have a very significant impact on the department's operations. Alice Barr from NBC explains how this would work from Washington.
Hi there. President Trump has long signaled this move to axe the Education Department was coming, though it can't be totally shuttered without Congress. The administration has already moved to slash half the staff in a preview of what's to come. President Trump making it official, signing an executive order
to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all.
The move aims to fulfill a campaign promise and a long-held conservative wish to transfer full education oversight to the states, where curriculum decisions are already made and most school funding happens. Protesters from Denver to Missouri, including teachers' union leaders, worry what will be lost at the federal level.
What it does fund are free and reduced lunches and special ed programs. They're hurting kids.
Abolishing the Education Department altogether would take an act of Congress. Democrats are opposed, and the White House and Education Secretary say core services like managing student loans and Pell Grants and supporting special education will continue.
We are looking at what other things we can transfer that might not need congressional approval at this point.
Some state education leaders welcome the efforts to cut red tape.
Optimizing the funds for the students, the parents, and the teachers by allowing these processes to get closer to where they are being used.
It all comes as the Justice Department is facing a new deadline today to fully answer questions about the deportation flights of alleged Venezuelan gang members. A federal judge seeking to determine if the White House defied his court order, calling previous answers woefully insufficient.
We think it's egregious that a single district judge is trying to tell the President of the United States who he can and cannot deport from our soil.
Part of a growing fight with the federal courts. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
And that does it for this week's episode of Crossroad Politics. We'll be here every Sunday for the rest of the legislative session. You can tune in at 10 a.m. here on WTHR+. So for Emily Longnecker, Nikki Kelly, I'm Anne-Marie Tiernan. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you next time, and make plans always to go vote.